Welcome to Email After Hours by SenderScore, powered by Validity.
We're your hosts. My name is Guy Hansen.
And I'm Danielle Gallant, and this is Email After Hours. On the podcast, we talk about the many ways that senders can damage their sender reputation and their inbox placement rates. There's bad list hygiene, improper authentication setup, failing to honor your unsubscribe request within 48 hours, or ideally immediately. The list goes on and on. And without fail, we are always asked, what about the content? What's the content doing to mess up my deliverability? And for those listeners, this episode is for you, because today we're talking about how your email content may be killing your deliverability.
We're joined by someone today who lives and breathes deliverability, LB Blair. LB is a true expert, and we go way, way back. She's got years of hands-on experience solving tough deliverability challenges for brands of all sizes, and I'll tell you what, she's seen every mistake and every email trend that we've ever come across, and she knows exactly what separates the senders who land in the inbox from those who end up in the abyss of the spam folder. Welcome to the show, LB. We're so excited to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Guy. And I'll say, I don't think I can say I've seen everything, because every time I think I've seen everything, somebody invents something new.
You're right. You're right.
And like I said, maybe we'll do a future episode on how like your website cybersecurity can affect your deliverability too, because I've seen that. But we're going to cover a little bit of that today as well. So I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And it's great to be reunited with colleagues. So this is just going to be like, a day back in the office.
You're right. There is always something new. There really is. And before we get into the topic today, we always ask an icebreaker question at the top. So, like we said, LB, you've seen a lot of emails, and you don't need to name names here. But what makes the worst email you've ever seen? Why was it so bad?
Oh, honestly, I made a LinkedIn post about this. It's great. I got an email to my corporate address that was trying to pitch their AI email writing service. And it was a biggest merge tag fail I've ever seen. It said, "Hello, no name. My main man, Emilio, was talking about you." And I'm like, I highly doubt that at this point, considering you don't even know my name. So yeah, that's probably the biggest email. It's like, hey guys, don't tell me you eat your own dog food and then throw up on my carpet. Like, this looks, I was like, if this is what you're selling, I immediately don't want it. So yeah, that's probably the worst email I've ever seen.
My main man, Emilio.
Yeah, my main man, Emilio was just talking about you. Yeah. No name. I'm like,
If he's listening today, we can help him.
Yeah, Emilio.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, so in today's conversation, we're going to begin by tackling the potentially problematic or most problematic components of an email's content piece by piece. And I think it's important and it's timely because we're already thinking about the trends and predictions for 2026. And one thing that we're already seeing loud and clear is a real move back to cleaner, simpler, more minimalist emails. And, a core part of that conversation is images. And I think that gives us a great starting point. It almost feels like we've come full circle from a decade ago when mailbox providers really filtered heavily on huge image-dense or image-only emails. So why are we back to this topic again?
So here's the thing. I hear, crazy things from people like, oh, if you put images in email, they'll go to spam. To which I always reply, if putting an image in your email causes it to go to spam, that is not your only problem. That is not your main problem. But honestly, I think it's super salient right now because of all the pressure that AI is putting on computing resources everywhere, at Google, at Microsoft, probably at Yahoo, and just everywhere. Computing resource costs have gone through the roof, which means storage costs are going up. And, I think at some level, the mailbox providers have to make a decision. do I really want to store that 7 megabyte GIF, 3/4 of the way down this email? And the answer, I think, in most cases is going to be no, because also it's not going to result in a great experience for the user if it doesn't load well.
Yeah, if it's taking forever to load, if everything's huge, this is where we tend to run into those issues. And kind of on the same note, we've always understood that a balanced ratio of text to images is important. But now, in the context of this conversation, it feels like that's becoming even more critical. Why do you think that is, LB?
Well, again, like I said, I think the pressure from computing resources, but I also think that, the biggest brands out there have been following y'all's advice for, years and years now. And then that kind of becomes the standard. But I don't know if it's even as much about the ratio in so much as it being that everything needs to be well optimized. The images need to be optimized. The code needs to be optimized. Because I think especially a lot of people forget, when I was, working for Validity, I would look in our engagement pixel data and I saw for some of the biggest brands in the world that, that 60% or more of opens were on mobile. Newspapers, auto manufacturers, cruise lines, doesn't matter. If you're a consumer brand, most of your opens are going to be on mobile. So now, you've got a smaller, device to load on, but also you've got who knows what internet connection. Are they on their cellular network? Are they on Wi-Fi? I think that's, I think, as internet moves more mobile first, I think that has also increased the pressure on making sure images load optimally.
And when they don't load, like, for example, if a message lands in the spam folder, and in certain mailbox providers, those images, even if they don't, may be off by default until they're trusted or whatever, that text that describes whatever those images are becomes really important. Guy and I have been kind of touting, not just from a display and user experience perspective, but from accessibility perspectives, that, like, it is really important to have alt text, descriptive alt text. And you said something kind of in our initial discussion about this, which was like, the solution for alt text is look at the image and say aloud what it is and describe it that way. And I love that. Do you think that's super important? Are you also on the descriptive alt text train?
Yes, massively so. Massively so, because here's what I'm seeing. Actually, with inbox testing recently, I was able to see for a client that 2 images, one of which was just like their logo, 2 images out of maybe 7 or 8 not having alt text was 100% of the difference between that email landing in the inbox and the spam folder. The actual campaign that had been seeded didn't have the alt text. We then fixed it and resent it. And that, from a content perspective, appeared to be the difference. And I think it's important for a lot of reasons. I think, again, AI plays into it. If you think about it, if you're trying to build a gen image AI, cough Google, I mean, they've already got a fantastic one, but if you're trying to enhance that, having images with descriptions is super helpful. And that, like, alt text, the HTML is super structured, well understood format of data. So it's easy for them to ingest. And I think that affects it. But I also think, yes, I think all the changes Google kind of made in 2024 and continue to make has allowed them to worry less about unauthenticated email and refocus those efforts on content, because the biggest trend we're kind of seeing, in terms of phishing emails, malware, and things like that, and even hacking in general, are the hackers hiding in plain sight. They're, getting into, they're doing account takeovers and emailing from authenticated domains, but they're sending crummy content. So I think Google and all the mailbox providers are really focusing in on content now that they've gone, okay, we're just going to screen this unauthenticated mail out.
But I don't want to leave the alt text conversation without, Guy had a really good example.
It's probably my favorite example of the year. And it was an email from Magnum Ice Cream, which had gone to my junk folder. So you saw the alt text for the main image. And it read something like, to young lovers standing in front of a fountain on a lovely summer afternoon, enjoying their Magnum ice creams together. And, this was just such a lovely description. I wanted to enable the images just to see what it actually looked like, if it was going to be as good in reality as the alt text was suggesting that it would be. And, it's a humorous example, but, this kind of feels, this is the area where images and text and the use thereof naturally overlaps. And even more important, because you've touched on it, LB, there's issues like, what screen readers and assistive tech need to be able to digest when they're scanning these emails. And do you have any guidance for our listeners today in terms of, best practices? What does good alt text actually look like? Does it have to be as extreme as my Magnum example?
I mean, honestly, I don't think that's really extreme. I think I think there are a ton of great speech to text. Like, this is how I actually do my alt text for my LinkedIn post, because I almost always put like an alt text on whatever I share. They actually make it easier on mobile than it is on desktop, but in terms of the LinkedIn app. But I will just use a speech to text and speak. I just read what I'm seeing. And I think that's the goal of what alt text is supposed to do for accessibility. And I think a big shout out I should give is Apple. Apple has been champions of accessible technology for a long time, and especially for those that are visually impaired. And I think you have to think about the fact it's not just folks on iCloud that are affected. It's also probably anybody routing their mail through the Apple Mail app as well. So if you are not seeing, if you're not seeing excessively high open rates at Apple, that means you're probably not inboxing 100% because they've got mail privacy protection, and you're going to get a lot of bot opens. But I mean, I literally, for my customers that I know are full inboxing, they see 75, 85% open rate at Apple, which iCloud, at me, mac.com, because most of those are probably using the Apple Mail client. So it's not going to be just iCloud opens you miss out on if your mail is not sufficiently accessible, because Apple Mail, Google or Yahoo or Hotmail, whatever, routed through Apple Mail, could also conceivably get put in the spam folder. But yeah, I think, I think it's important for accessibility, and that affects a greater proportion of the population than people like to realize, because it's not just, you think visually impaired, you think blind. No, there are a lot of people, like my mother has macular degeneration, and it just makes, some finer details. Having something read it to her is a much better experience. And you're leaving out, you're basically just cutting yourself off from those sales if you don't have alt text it's another opportunity to advertise as well. Just like the subject line, the pre-header text, it's part of the experience for mail that goes to spam, and you still want that to look good and be useful. You want to give people a reason to do what you did, show the images, maybe pull it out of the spam folder.
That's a perfect segue, because, okay, we've kind of talked about and tackled some of the mistakes that marketers can make with the creative, with the images. And as Guy would say, the relationship between those two that sets out your stall, presents it, gets it ready to market. And now you're really hoping that the subscriber is actually going to do something with that picture that you've painted. We want them to take action, which generally means clicking through. And in reality, there's still a lot of inbuilt friction that makes this desired outcome less likely. So let's talk about what can go wrong with links, the actual links in the message. Broken links? Let's start there.
Oh, broken link. Honestly, I will say this, definitely use a tool that tests all your links. And honestly, I would test before you send the final campaign. Like, typically what I do is I advise clients, like, have your main campaign set up, clone it, run an inbox test, and then see. And usually most inbox tests, like good ones like Validity, are going to check all the links and make sure that they're valid. And I would, definitely assure that, because here's the thing. The reason it's such a faux pas to have a broken link in the email is due to cybersecurity concerns, because malicious actors, similar to how Guy was talking about, you need to have a good image to text ratio, because back in the day, malicious actors decided, oh, well, to get around the filter, I'll just put the banned words in the image. Well, so then we saw the rise of, well, you can't have all image emails. I would say malicious actors, what they would do is they would send the email with no malicious content behind the links. And they would wait until they were pretty sure it had gotten through the spam filters. And then they would they would turn on the website. So it was no longer a 404. It was full of malware. So that's one of the main reasons is the spam filters, are going to click some portion of those links and check them, and especially in a B2B environment. And if they can't, that's just a red flag. It's just like, if you can't look up any history on it, that's a red flag. So that definitely don't do that.
I think that's a great point, and I'd like to dig into it a little bit more, because I think we all see every day, consumers are becoming more and more worried about online fraud, rightly so. And I think, this is another big challenge which maps onto email links, because, if there's anything about them just looks a little bit sketchy, a little bit untrustworthy, you're not going to click on them, even if you do get to see them, because, those changes, if the mailbox providers haven't saved you from that decision already by putting it into junk. So how do senders make links more trustworthy? I mean, I guess the starting point there is just talking about, lack of link security and some of the reasons for that, right?
Yeah, you gotta make sure that you got SSL set up, on your link branding. Some mailbox provider or some platforms, ESPs make this easier. Some make it a little more difficult, but generally all of them support it, so that the links in your emails are branded over with, a HTTPS secure, link domain. But, it's definitely important to make sure even those underlying links, because again, spam filters are going to check some of those, make sure that they are HTTPS secure, because if not, and then also don't use public link shorteners. I'm sure everybody's heard that, but the reason is effectively the same as the 404 error, the broken link, because the malicious actor, whatever's behind a bit.ly link, it could change after message delivery. So that's why those are such a bad idea. It's fine to use private link shorteners if you're the only one that can use that link shortening domain. If it's custom to you, that's fine. And I think once, I think HubSpot, they have a trusted link shortener, because again, it's login walled behind their platform. And you have to be paying them something. It's not a free public link shortener. So I would say don't use link shorteners that are, free and public, and make sure, your site security, make sure, you have SSL certificates set up for any link you're going to put in an email.
And also, kind of on this note, you've brought up to us shared domain links too. Basically putting links to domains that you don't own in the message. Why is that problematic?
Yeah, I think it complicates filtering. I think it's similar to, I don't think it's quite the same as the bit.ly problem. It's more, if you're using an email service provider and, you don't brand over their link hosting, then your reputation is going to get conflated with the reputation of everyone else using that same shared link. And I think it just makes the filtering more complicated. I think definitely the greater proliferation of different domains, at least in the HTML body of the email, maybe not the underlying click through, because most people have a link to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, etc. Right? So they'll link out to a bunch of different places, but at least in the HTML body, I personally think the gold standard is having everything branded over with your own custom link tracking domain that is aligned with the sending domain. So, if you're sending from email.domain.com, hopefully your link domain will be link.domain.com. And then everything, branded over, secured, no broken links, and life should be good.
Okay, we got images kind of covered. We got links talked about. And now we come, I think, to the bigger, more complete picture. How do the emails look? Are they digestible? Like, you may have all of the link best practices in place, you may have images in place, but we see so many examples in our own mailboxes of poor rendering in dark mode, a lack of responsiveness. So, how are these big picture, pun intended, fails hurting email deliverability?
Oh man. So, and one thing I'll add to that is images loading slowly, because I think we all have to account for attention spans in the age of TikTok, which are short, like perilously short. I think, so that your images need to be compressed, losslessly compressed, so they don't lose any quality. Because if they lose quality, then visually it won't look good. But you want to losslessly compress them so that they load as fast as possible. And you will be astounded. I've seen this save people like 90% of the image file size in some cases. But yes, I think the emails definitely they have to look good with images turned off. They need to look good with images turned on. They need to look good on an iPhone, on a desktop, because your audience is diverse. If the audience is diverse, and whatever you're sending, you don't know, are they at home? Are they on the road? Like, you can't know every single person's situation. So you need to make sure your email works in every situation, or every reasonable situation that you could come across. And I think some of the biggest mistakes that I've kind of seen is some folks have shied too far away from, sales and promotions, kind of, or, they're afraid to make the ask. And I think that makes the email confusing. I think, like, sometimes I
Mhm.
get emails and I'll, like, look at it. There's a big image at the top. There's nothing for me to click above the scroll. And I'm just kind of looking at it like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I'm not really sure what they want from me. It's like, I'm assuming you emailed me for a reason other than you wanted me to see this picture. So I think, don't be afraid to, like, put the call to action, in a reasonable spot. I think some of the best advice I can give people is, what looks good on your website may not work for email. Like, what looks good on your website may not work for email. It's a fundamentally different animal than web. And, the design concerns, there's a much greater proliferation of mailbox providers and clients that you have to be concerned with than, generally there's a limited number of browsers, and many of them are, built on Chromium these days. So, they all kind of have the same underlying core in a lot of cases. Chromium or Mozilla, basically. So, there's not as much diversity in web. There's a ton of diversity in email. And I think, yeah, you've got to account for how is this going to look on mobile and how is it going to look on desktop. And it's a hard problem to solve. I don't personally work on, like, the content side and layout side as much, because those people are wizards that are good at it.
It's complicated. Here also, I am going to issue my plea to senders to optimize their emails for dark mode. Please, please optimize, because I mean, we're talking about links showing up properly. We're talking about images showing up properly. I haven't really pulled a stat on broad adoption of dark mode in maybe like a year or two. And when I was looking into it before this recording, it's something like 50% of mobile users are using dark mode, and that's way up for Android. So please code your emails for dark mode for people like me.
Honestly, yeah, nothing will catch you and my unsubscribe faster as a brand than blaring my eyes at like 10 o'clock at night with an all white email that doesn't work with my dark mode. Because I actually have my phone set so, like, based on the time of day, it switches. So, you got to think about it. A lot of people are coming home at the end of the day. Maybe that's when they check their mailbox. If their phone is switched into dark mode, you're going to be a total record scratch with that email that doesn't work well with it.
I have one more question here, because we talk about one of the things that I think is probably pretty commonly known, at least by people who are experts in the industry, is that it's not going to be great for filtering if you have a PDF attachment in your email. Fine, that's all fine. But Guy and I, even between two experts, I put a question to him, and we're not sure that we agree on the answer. So I want to put a question to you, kind of just, what do you think? Even if you don't have an email attachment as a PDF, like within the email, What if you link directly to a PDF within the email? If it goes not to a web page that you can download the PDF from, but a PDF link, do you think that's an issue?
Like it links to like an automatic PDF download?
Yes.
I guess I will say I don't think that's the end of the world. I think that's definitely light years better than just attaching a PDF because that is way more it just increases the image weight or it increases the email file size. So it's like even if, the mailbox provider starts to have to think about, well, if you inbox this and the person opens it, but maybe they jump right back out, I'm stuck storing this forever. That being said, I would probably make it at least a 2-click, kind of like you don't want a 1-click unsubscribe in the body of your emails anymore. You want to put that in the header to work with the list, the in-app unsubscribe at Google, Yahoo, Outlook, or I don't know if it works with Outlook now, actually, iCloud, and basically like everywhere, right? But I would say I would make it a 2-click, to be honest, because I could see some spam filters with like a very cybersecurity folks, especially in B2B. I would be really worried about getting through a filter if you have a link click where the PDF auto downloads, because I'm seeing an absolute rise in the corporate spam filters, Proofpoint, Barracuda, Cisco, Mimecast, etc., checking those links in the email.
Guy, we're both about half right, which makes us so perfect
I was about
to come
say,
together.
LB's come down right in the middle between the sort of two contrasting points of our family argument. Anyway, we need to start wrapping up. I want to share a quote with you I came across the other day because I really liked it. The most successful email programs are going to be the ones that start making trust visible, and that the focus is going to start shifting away from simply reaching the inbox to actually proving you belong there. I really like that. So pulling all of these threads together from this great conversation we've been having today, it feels like the direction you're pointing in, LB, is towards better quality messaging, obviously. So, even if an email meets all the technical standards we've talked about so far, all that great work can still be undone. If there's the odd typo, the personalization's not as hot as it could be, lack of relevance to the subscriber. And so, just because you got all the technical stuff right doesn't mean the job's completely finished, does it?
Not at all. And I think relevance is still the number one thing. Most of what most of what we talked about today, I think in terms of content is, if you're already doing the work to make sure the messages you're sending are relevant with your data strategy, with your acquisition strategy, et cetera, right? If you're, and your timing and your data intelligence analytics, right? You're doing all that good work to make sure that the message is relevant. I don't want to see you lose at the inbox because you sent like a 2 megabyte image that could have been losslessly compressed down to 500 KB and been just fine. But I think you're right. There's still relevance is king. Relevance is number one. And if you're sending, and that includes the content, how it's constructed, the message, the offer, et cetera. But absolutely, I think that's it. I think we're going to see the filters get even tighter.
I love that. Well, we're about to close out. And just like we did at the beginning with an icebreaker, we're going to ask a closing question. And I hope you find this one kind of fun. You talked about LinkedIn. You're active on LinkedIn. You're always posting great content there. And when we met initially to sort of talk about this episode and the topic and what we wanted to get into, you spoke to us about how you grew up kind of in the country. You can fix a car. You can get your hands dirty. I think that's fair to say.
Yes.
But I want to just reference one of your recent LinkedIn posts. So I'm going to read just a couple snippets from it because I swear this is going to frame the question. So it started with secure your truck, which does tie in. I quote, "This is exactly how modern hackers work. They steal the things they need, your server space, your processing power, your email reputation, to steal the things that they directly profit from. The big difference here is Google doesn't care if you file a police report." Later, it says, "No one sells deliverability insurance for expenses and lost revenue from your reputation being destroyed by poor security." I love this. Our question to close out the episode, which I thought would just be fun, is someone did sell email deliverability insurance, what would it definitely not cover?
Wow, that's a hard one. That's a really hard one. If someone sold deliverability insurance,
Like
I can't even
my dog is a
imagine.
lab mix. So if I went to get
Mhm.
insurance for him, they were like, well, we're not covering hip dysplasia.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, no, for sure. Gosh, that's so what would not be okay. You bought a list. We're not covering that. You
Yes.
bought a list, you get what you deserve. I mean, because here's the thing I think a lot of people don't understand is you found where to buy that list and maybe you're newish to email, maybe this is something new for you. I guarantee you the spam trap aggregators that supply block lists, the block lists that have their own traps, the mailbox providers that have their own traps, they know how to get their traps into that list. So it's never, they're constantly, everything's constantly in flux. It's one of those things I've unfortunately run into a lot of situations where email alone cannot fix a chronic underinvestment in a business's marketing efforts. I get that a lot of people want it to be magic, but it's just not. Email takes hard work, dedication, and making the right choice again and again and again and again. And, I think there's honestly one of my favorite quotes from poker is sometimes you make the right call and lose anyway. The important thing is to consistently keep making the right call. I think that's Daniel Negreanu. He's like, I think he's maybe a Canadian poker player, actually. But I think that's the thing. Sometimes you may have an offer miss the mark. You may have an email miss the mark. Don't let that cause you to, question your entire everything, make a knee-jerk reaction. Keep making the right call. And that's what's so important.
I think you played a great hand with that response. So, LB, thank you so much for sharing your fantastic insights and expertise in the email marketing space with us today. For our listeners who might be interested in connecting with you or learning more about your work, what's the best way for them to reach out to continue the conversation?
LinkedIn. As Danielle pointed out, I'm chronically online there. I think it's like //LB Blair. But you can find me as Lori Duff Blair on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. And directly to our listeners, be sure to tune in again in another 2 weeks. Hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.org because that's where all our past episodes live and a load more great resources to help you become stronger senders.
Guy and I are always so proud of the guests that join us on Email After Hours, and we're always looking for new guests to come on our episodes too. So if you'd like to join us for an upcoming episode, drop a comment, ping us on LinkedIn, or send us an email at emailafterhours@validity.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Be sure to tune in next time and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.com for loads more great resources to help you become a stronger sender.
To all you sleepless senders out there, thank you for joining us after hours, and see you next time.